Cool. So the recording has now started, and the stream should now be live on both Twitch, because I'm using that as my debug area, and on LinkedIn. Shri and Ali, could you say something, please?
Hi there, is this working? Testing, 1, 2, 3.
It is all about anti-agile and agile coach sitting in here. Great. Okay, testing 1, 2, 3.
Brilliant stuff. From a quick check, although the audio is about 10 seconds behind our conversation, I think everything's coming through loud and clear. If anyone actually turns up, I'll ask them in the comments. But I'm just assuming we're just going to have a bit of a fun, chill one. So thanks for joining me today, guys. Oh, we have a cheeky signpost saying audio works.
Great.
Cool. So the reason I wanted to invite you guys on to have this discussion is a friend of mine in my personal life was speaking about trying to transition his team to Agile recently. And he was incredibly insistent on the point, if I implement Scrum to the letter, I'm Agile, right? And I don't know about you guys. I kind of hold a little bit of offense to that. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to share my views with him, but I also wanted to use it as a talking point to just see what people have to say, because I think it's interesting and something that's probably echoed along the lines of quite a few business people without that familiarity with the intricacies of Agile. So before we jump into the topic, would you guys like to introduce yourselves for the stream?
Absolutely. Ali, do you want to go first?
Sure. Ali Asghar here. I'm a senior delivery manager at Datatonic. Been a project manager for, since 2009. So 12 years experience, wide-ranging experience from web development to bespoke systems to now consultancy across all spectrums, really.
Oh, it would be really great to be able to drill into some of that more traditional project management thinking as part of this conversation.
Speaking of which, I come into the picture here. Hello, everyone. My name is Shri, and I am an Agile coach with Datatonic. And of course, I've been with Datatonic for about 8-ish months. But my Agile stint is from 2010-ish. And that's where I've transformed a lot of accounts, engagements, client setups into Agile ways of working. Very contradicting to the title of the topic or title for the day. But yeah, I would love to join hands with Jamie and Ali to discuss more about Agile or non-Agile. Thank you.
So I guess opening up the questions, what do you guys think about the general premise of the conversation being that strict adherence to Scrum is in fact an anti-Agile pattern? Do you agree with it or disagree with me?
I would just jump in and just make a distinction between Agile and Scrum. Obviously, Agile is a philosophy. Scrum is a particular methodology that sits within Agile, and it's a type of delivery that takes place. Sri can probably shed light on the various others. So, yeah, I'll pass on to Sri.
Yeah, so it's an interesting topic, Jamie, and that's probably one reason why I wanted to jump in. I mean, for the benefit of the listeners here, I would like to first probably take a step back and define what a framework is, right? So in general terms, a framework is a real or a conceptual structure which is intended to serve a purpose or guide you to build something, right? Whereas a methodology is something which is a branch of a logic of the structure. So again, coming back to this, right? So we will have to understand why Agile became so successful over the past few years. We all have been delivering projects in waterfall. We still deliver projects in a legacy way of working and developing products and software. So why did Agile become so successful? Now, if I have to say, it's because of the satisfied customers. We have early value realization, or early return on investments, improved quality, adaptability, etc., etc. So because of which Agile took a prominence at the moment. But people have, or at least my take is, people have misinterpreted these frameworks as something that's written in stone, and you got to really follow the way it's written, which, per me, I completely agree with the heart of the topic, and with Jamie yourselves, because it's not written in stone after all. All you need to do is to take few bits and pieces which would connect back to all the points that I've told you in terms of satisfied customers, improved quality, etc., etc. I can elaborate more on this in the next few minutes, but this is my first take on the topic.
Oh, it's really interesting. Something you touched on about almost zealotry of the followers, to the extent that I don't know if it was the 2020 version of the Scrum Guide or the one before it. Sprint ceremonies actually got changed to sprint events because people were getting, well, just so zealous about them, which is amusing.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. So there's been a good approach to refine the Scrum Guide. I mean, I'm being very specific to Scrum Guide now. It was first written in 2010, right? And the number of pages were 130. I'm not exaggerating. 2010 Scrum Guide was 130 pages. Today, 2020, that's when the last revision happened, and now there are 13 pages. So that goes to show that people who founded Scrum, who discovered this framework methodology, they want to keep it less prescriptive. They want you to experiment. They just handed it a white canvas to you. They want you to paint the picture that you want to paint, not something which they've already painted and you just blindly follow the picture, right? So that's a classic example, which kind of supports this topic of discussion of saying, don't blindly follow a framework. Try and take bits and pieces of the framework and try and make it work for you based on your context in the organization.
The interesting thing to me, at least, is why the antithesis of this very point is so often taken upon, in that, the Scrum Guide says it is this way, we must do it exactly this way. What is it about the human mind or the business structures of tech that leads people to often thinking it is rote prescription and then leading us down a dark path, which will cause us so many more headaches in the months or years to come?
I can give you my take.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can give you my take on that. I mean, I've worked for several organizations that say they're agile. And the big question is, what is agile? And part of it, to be honest, is people almost trying to conform to something or their version of agile, which is, okay, there's this framework. And whilst they say agile, actually a number of organizations that as I said, they say they work in agile methodologies, they don't. And it's almost like no one truly knows what agile is. So that's why the lean-to is what you call this framework. So you've got documentations that's there. It's like, okay, this is what's supposed to be in this sprint ceremony or events or whatever. These are the things that are supposed to be there. And you find these days that some people have those events even though they're not required. So strict adherence. You have them for the sake of strictness and doing them, rather than sometimes things aren't required. And it's like, I think it's a lean to, actually. It's almost like, okay, we don't necessarily know what Agile truly means, so let's just go to the documentation, or at least this framework that we're aware of, call it Scrum or whatever, Kanban, whatever it is, and we'll just do everything by the book. And the whole essence of Agile, if you look at Agile in the dictionary, I think it's something like to move quickly and easily. That's what Agile is, right? And it's the ability to, I think in basic forms, it's like to learn, adapt. I think there were 3 or 4 things, like, but ultimately adaptation, to be able to flexibly approach something. So, and the irony is, while we're supposed to be more flexible, there's this idea of rigidity to the framework. I'll pass on to Shri.
No, absolutely. I think you've covered most of it there. Just to add on to trying to answer Jamie's question. Yeah. So I personally feel the first exposure for you. Imagine if for me it happened in 2010. For Jamie, it probably would have happened in I don't know, 2014, 15ish. For you, Ali, maybe in the very kind of recent past. So the first exposure towards learning a new methodology or framework or Agile as a concept as a whole, now that is where you got to be. I wouldn't blame any trainers here, but while training your people, while educating them, while bringing them on board with something which is new ways of working, you got to let them know that this is not something that's written in stone, and this is not something you are expected to adhere to 100%. All you need to understand is Agile manifestos, right? So that's how I open my training all the time. What do you mean by Agile manifestos? Individuals and interactions, be it Scrum, be it Scrum of Scrum, be it Kanban, be it XP, be it Less, be it DAD, be it SAFe. I've just named 7 framework for you. All of them talk about individuals and interactions. That's Agile, right? So the trainers, when they start training people first time around Agile ways of working, all they need to do is to train them on the 12 principles of Agile development, and of course 4 manifestos, which are individuals and interactions over process and tools, working software over or working solution over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration. That's something which we keep talking about more often than not, over contract negotiations, right? So responding to change, which is what Ali brought in as a beautiful point. How quickly would you be able to adapt to the new situation? How quickly would you be able to embrace the change over following a comprehensive plan? As long as you have these 4 within your system, regardless of whatever framework you use, you're still an Agile organization. That's my take.
I think something Ali touched on previously really hits home for me, in that it's an education piece. So an Agile coach I really enjoy working with recently walked me through the principles of Shu Hari, with Shu being following the master's prescription to the rote letter, Ha looking at beginning to branch out and forming your own opinions, and Re that true level of mastery and being able to adapt. So maybe the heart of a problem is most organizations and most practitioners of Agile, be it Scrum Masters or more likely the developers and executives of the business, are at the Shu level. So is that something we as a general tech community need to focus on and just propagate knowledge, as the world of the internet is such an amazing place. It's all about sharing knowledge and sharing thoughts, right? But how do we get this knowledge into the heads of tech geeks across the world, I guess?
Yeah. Probably let me take this and pass it on to Ali at some point. Yeah, it's an interesting thing that you told just now, Jamie, because most organizations would get a lot or tons and tons of value if they kind of forget all their frameworks, keep their frameworks aside, and just educate their people, their engineers, their teammates about focused delivery on high quality products to their end users, right? So how would that come? By making them realize that Agile is not something that one size fits all solution. So it definitely is not. You will have to, you don't, I mean, Agile works best when you don't have the final product, when you don't envision your final product, when you don't know how to get there, when you don't know when the project is going to be complete, right? So at that point, you can apply any framework that you want to, but as long as you're delivering value, that's great. If you're not delivering value, then it again comes back to the same thing of sticking to a particular framework, which is an anti-pattern of Agile. I don't know what, Ali, you have anything to add on to?
I think. Look, I'll echo that in terms of, even if you had the Prince 2 kind of framework, and it was like, I think it was some tailored. That was the thing, that you had these. And if we go back a step, because Agile is fairly new, right? And Prince 2 is kind of established, a lot more established than Agile, although Agile's the buzzword and the key thing nowadays, is because people realize that by the time you get to implementing something, half the requirements have changed. Agile accommodates for all of that. But even within Prince, you had this thing called, tailored, right? And what people struggle to get is that answer all these questions on interviews in terms of the themes and processes within Prince, but not get that actually all of those are guidelines that you pick and choose based on the problem or the project at hand. And it's the same thing with Agile. I think, in answer to your in response to your question, Jamie, I think it's challenging getting this education to the tech community, because there's so much information out there. If I Googled Agile at the moment, or looked at, the best Agile forms, techniques, frameworks, whatever, I'd get so many different videos on so many different things. But ultimately, as Shree's saying, if you can, because what we're talking about here is not just, hey, throw away the frameworks. The frameworks have their purpose. They are almost the container within which work is done, and they provide solid guidelines. The essence of any framework, be it Prince, be it Agile, anything else, is just using kind of common sense. What works for you? And if it's working, great. If it isn't, then dish it, dash it, whatever. The bottom line is, if it is working, can we improve it? How can we improve it? And that's what, you get some events around that, the retros and the retros of what went right this sprint, and how can we implement it. In traditional forms, it's lessons learned. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's a challenging one. Getting the information out to the tech community is a challenging one. I do think that if we can continue as we mean to go on in terms of knowledge sharing between whether it's companies, whether it's in meetups, whether it's in communities, I don't think you're going to have a right answer. It's just, the bottom line is the essence. If everyone can take away the essence of let's make this work, then they'll get what they need to get from the Agile framework.
Exciting words, as I think that's all it really boils down to. One of my universal principles is don't be a dick, which applies to essentially all laws across all lands. They essentially all boil down to that. And Agile is, let's just make something work and do something we can be proud of.
Yeah. So when we discussed about us going live with you, Jamie, what I did was to just go through. I keep reading blogs, and what I did was to go through each and every Scrum guide, the book of knowledge of Scrum, book of knowledge of Kanban, book of knowledge of Scrums, right? So in all three, all I see as commonality is, I'm just going to take another 30 seconds to read this. It says the Scrum framework is immutable, which is fine, while implementing only parts of Scrum is possible, but the result may not be Scrum, which is okay for us. Our intention is not to become a Scrum organization. Our intention is to deliver value to our customers so that they realize early return on investment. So the same thing happened in Kanban as well. While I was curious, went into Kanban guide to see that's exactly what they've said there as well. The theory upon which Kanban is based is also shared by many existing value-oriented methodologies and frameworks. Because of their similarities, Kanban can be and should be augmented with those delivery techniques. It is so clearly written in all these guides, right? So it's just a matter of, I like the word that Ali used as a common sense approach, right? So there's no rocket science here. It is just common sense for us to use this effectively to suit our ecosystem.
I guess one of the big issues in the world is common sense just isn't all that common anymore. So maybe part of the problem is the adherence to the guidelines, because there's just the lack of trust about common sense. But one of the fundamental principles of Agile is that transparency and trust. And if we don't have that amongst ourselves and with the wider community, then how can we ever proclaim to be truly Agile?
Very true. Very true. I mean, whenever I train people or introduce them to Agile for the first time, all we do is to play games and bring these core concepts of transparency, collaboration, inspection, adaptation through games. So, because I personally feel, I totally agree with you 100% on that. Collaboration, inspection, transparency, honesty, openness, all these are key components of Agile, not Scrum, Kanban, etc. They just form a structure for you to deliver stuff, but all you need to do is to collaborate with people, have the trust amongst your own team members, so that, and have more individual face-to-face conversations, as opposed to sending 100 lines of emails and expecting a response from them, and those kind of things, right? So yeah, I think these are some of the ingredients of becoming an Agile organization, really.
I think that would be a good idea, Jamie, in terms of, Shree's kind of like talked about the pains of project management, as it were, and again, common sense, right? Where instead of hiding behind hundreds of lines of emails, you could just have a conversation. We should maybe do a little podcast on I wouldn't call it issue resolutions, but maybe the pains of PMing, or pains of project management, and how to address them. Those kind of things. But yeah, echo everything Shree has said. I've attended one of Shree's trainings, and what I will say is that the games element is actually, it's a really good way of actually physically experiencing and seeing, like observing how effective working in an Agile way can be, and how important we throw these words around like trust and communication and whatnot, but actually seeing it in place and the impact of it, trusting and transparency, seeing what other people are doing real time, it really adds its weight in gold in terms of understanding the true value of Agile.
Oh, it'd be exciting to have that conversation with you, although it would probably need to be a little bit moderated, as my views, at least, on the pains of project management would get a little bit colourful a little bit quickly. Oh, I'm not really sure where to go with this topic, so I'd just like to throw out a thought I've been having about the state of Agile in organizations. So I come from a strong software engineering background, and what the two of you are probably familiar with is the breaking down of monolithic applications into more microservice-based approaches as time goes on. Is traditional Scrum or traditional project management, such as Prince2, akin to the monolith of the software era? And are we, as a profession, lagging perhaps 5 years behind them? And can we take a lesson from them and break out into our own microservices of some sort?
I think that's a really good question, actually. My view on that is, I've never worked for an organization that's purely Agile. And when I say that, I think the approach nowadays is Agile is often used. I see so many CVs, when they're people applying for jobs and whatnot, Agile, Scrum Master, this and the other. And it's all good. Those are certifications, for example. At the same time, my experience has been that usually people, because you still need the framework, like I say framework, I don't want to interchange words and terminology here, but essentially there's a logical sequence of events. And what I have found is that more recently what I'm seeing is this hybrid approach. We are working, even evolving from this hybrid approach to more, we are slowly moving to a purist agile approach. However, I don't think we're there. We're still in this hybrid era where traditional project. So what I would say is, like, the traditional project life cycle is typically something like requirements analysis, design, coding, testing, acceptance, right? And what I would say is you've got this. It's almost like delivery and development. So it's, what I'm seeing is almost waterfall in delivery, agile in development. So there's a particular part of it that's strongly agile, but the overall flow of it is traditional waterfall in that respect, because what we're seeing now is we still have statements of work, for example, with this is what needs to be delivered, this is the end thing that needs to be delivered. And being agile accommodates any small changes within that, but ultimately we've got to deliver what's on the statement of work. That's my view on it. So I don't think it's that historic or that much. We're not lagging behind in that, you know, in that respect. What I will say, in terms of anyone who's using pure waterfall or traditional, you know, traditional project methodologies, or even approaches, is probably behind, because they're lacking the you know, the agility, the ability to be more flexible and accommodate change. But I would also say that anyone, if in my early project days, although things were waterfall, agile is almost like a common sense thing, that if there were changes, you'd have to make some changes or accommodate certain things like resources or team players not being available, or something comes up. You have to deal with that, right? Now it's just the allowance is a lot greater because we work in this agile world. That's what I would say. So we're not that far behind, I don't think.
I know we have just a minute, Jamie, before you make your closing comments. I've in the world of Agile, we've heard we are Scrum, but we are Agile, but we call it Scrum Butts and Agile Butts, and of course we also call it Scrum Fall. It's a mix of Scrum and Waterfall. We call it Scrum Fall. So to your question, right? So in terms of bringing up these software engineering practices or any kind of these microservices, I personally feel Scrum theory is found on empiricism and lean thinking, right? So when I say that, empiricism usually asserts the knowledge which comes from the experience to make your decisions based on what you've observed. So, and of course, it employs your iterative and incremental approach to development. So essentially, if we imbibe these framework, I mean, not to the letter again, and we start, concentrating or focusing on value delivery incrementally or iteratively, I think we, or any organization, can be an agile organization, and you don't have to stick to any particular framework to do so. That's my closing comments.
Well, on that note, I'd just like to thank the two of you profusely for joining me today. It's been a great conversation. I think the heart of the issue we boiled it down to is there just needs to be more education and more talking about these things to get the ideas out there and to get people from that shoe level up to perhaps a ha, or maybe eventually in time a re. And the best way we can do that is by having these conversations with our audiences and having that layer of transparency and just trying to propagate those ideas out. So this is our step forward in the world of making the world a more agile place. So
Thanks,
with that,
Jamie.
thank you both.
Fantastic.
And have a good one.
Thank you for this. Thank you for this, Jamie. Thank you, Ali.
Cheers. Thanks.
Have a good one.